I'm Jimmy Mack from Overwatch, and this is our second webinar on a series that we're doing while we're on some of these restrictions, just trying to create awareness on social issues. And recently we've had a suicide in our community from a caretaker, and this really hits home, not only for the epilepsy community, but from the community that I came from, the veteran community, which also has a suicide epidemic. So today's the last day of Mental Health Awareness Month, and we wanted to, wrap it up with something educational for everybody, because suicide's a human issue. So we got Charlynn Johns on here from Stop One, and we're excited to have her on here to do her introduction to suicide prevention with Talk Saves Lives. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Charlynn, and we can get this whole thing started.
Okay, thanks again for the opportunity. And just first off, I am going to give you the non-mirrored version of the helpline. The disaster helpline, while we're talking about suicide prevention today, from the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, the disaster helpline is implemented when there's a national disaster or emergency declared in any given area. So please make note of this number. It's 800-985-5990. You can also text Talk With Us and text that to 66746. That's the disaster distress helpline. So you might not feel like you're having suicidal ideations, but you're just anxious about the state of the world and the environment that you find yourself in. And this disaster line is intended for those that use. It's also intended, as well as the crisis line, it's intended to be for anyone. So if the person that's having the distress is not comfortable making the call, or it's like, no, I'll be okay, don't worry about it, those helplines are designed for anybody surrounding that person to be able to call. They're going to be able to tell you how to talk to that person, how to relieve the immediate anxiety, and as well as keep that person safe, or to keep you safe, because that's the main goal is really in suicide prevention, is that it's designed to keep you safe for that urgent crisis period. So that's how the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention kind of kicks off. It's a broad stroke about what suicide prevention looks like, what the suicide statistics are, and how you can intervene and make a difference in your community as well as to yourself. There's a great deal of stigma surrounding mental health, surrounding asking for help, as Jimmy said. In the veteran community, of course, there's a kind of suck it up, buttercup, and don't ask anybody for help. But this really is an unprecedented time in our history, and it's an unprecedented time in the emotional sphere of the world. So don't hesitate to reach out for a friend or reach out for yourself. So again, I want you to take note of that disaster distress crisis line. It's 800-985-5990. You can also see that disaster distress line on our website. We'll share our website again at the end, which is stopone, STOPONE.info. There's lots of information that you can access. There's downloadable information on knowing the signs of suicide, and all of that kind of stuff is there, readily accessible to you. And it's it's laid out to where if you just have 1 minute here, you can direct somebody. Here's 1 minute and you can find out some information about suicide prevention. Do you have 5 minutes? Here's 5 minutes. The Talk Saves Lives webinar is posted on our website. You can see that. You can also see a longer suicide prevention, a little more detailed that's veteran specific. It's from the Texas Suicide Prevention Council, and it's also posted on our website, stopone.info. So without further ado, again, thank you, Jimmy and the Overwatch community. Let's get started with Talk Saves Lives.
Critical
Can
and
you-
life-saving.
Can you guys hear me?
Typically, a life may be saved.
I'm going to start over. You couldn't hear any of
No.
Charlynn. Okay. All right, we're going to start this over. Sorry about that. I'm new at this webinar stuff.
You're doing a good job.
All right, so you're on, we're gonna share screen. Share.
Hi, this is Charlynn Johns. I'm the program facilitator for Stop One Suicide Prevention at the Dallas Veteran Resource Center. Thanks for joining us today for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, Talk Saves Lives. And we want to tell you that suicide is a health issue, and we're going to talk and get you equipped and empowered to stop one suicide and probably potentially much more. Suicide is a complex health issue, but suicide can be prevented despite its complexity. Just like there's warning signs and risk factors for other crises, like cardiac arrest, we can learn the warning signs and risk factors that can help us prevent people from dying by suicide. Like other health issues, time can be a critical and life-saving measure. Typically, a life may be saved if you allow time for the person's suicide risk to subside or get through that period of distress and to get mental health help. To prevent suicide, we need to identify persons who might be suicidal, as well as take an active role in connecting them to help before they take action to end their lives. Now, today we're going to cover some statistics to give you an idea of the scope of the problem of suicide. We're going to go over some of the research findings, including the risk and protective factors that relate to suicide, and we'll talk about what works and what we can all do to prevent this leading cause of death. How we talk about suicide matters. Before we get started, I want to go over terminology that is used when we talk about suicide. It's important to model appropriate language so we don't perpetuate the stigma of suicidal mental health conditions. So here's some language do's and don'ts. Let's establish a baseline of shared language. We avoid using the phrase committed suicide as it can have a negative connotation. Instead, we use died by suicide, ended his or her life, or killed him or herself. Now, when talking about suicide and suicide attempts, we avoid referring to failed or successful. Instead, we encourage phrases such as suicide attempt, suicide, or death by suicide. Educating the public is critical in encouraging help seeking for suicide. Suicide is a significant issue that affects individuals, families, and communities worldwide. So let's start with some of those statistics that demonstrate the scope of the problem. Over 800,000 people die by suicide every year. That works out to a suicide every 40 seconds worldwide. In 2016, in the United States, suicide is the 10th leading cause of death. For ages 10 to 44 in America, it's the second leading cause of death. Suicide takes more lives in the U.S. than homicide, war, and natural disasters combined. In 2016, which is the latest year we have data for, 44,965 people died by suicide. For every suicide, there are 25 other attempts. That's about 1 million Americans each year who have survived a suicide attempt. Suicide impacts individuals and communities, and it's estimated that the majority of Americans will experience a suicide loss over the course of their lifetime. Many loss survivors are profoundly impacted. America Foundation for Suicide Prevention has resources for those grieving a suicide loss. Suicide also has an extreme economic impact, aside from the devastating toll on families and communities. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that for the year 2016, suicide cost the United States $69 billion, primarily due to lost wages and productivity. So let's go on to research. It's really only been in the last few decades that scientists have been studying suicide, but research is shedding light on many critical areas. We still have a lot more to learn. One of the biggest questions research explores is, why do people take their own life? There isn't a single cause, but rather suicide occurs from several stressors and health issues converge to create an experience of hopelessness and despair. The large majority of people who die by suicide have a mental health condition at the time of their death that contribute. It might not have been diagnosed or adequately treated, but mental health conditions are not the only thing that contribute to suicide. Mental health conditions cannot be the whole story because mental health conditions are common, and the vast majority of people who suffer from these illnesses do not die by suicide. There are many factors that increase risk as well. We've learned that the brains of people who die by suicide differ from those who die from other causes in terms of structure and function, specifically in areas related to stress response and impulse control. We've learned that most people who are suicidal are ambivalent about death. Part of them wants to live, but part of them wants to die. This research has informed a key strategy in suicide prevention that involves engaging the part of the person that wants to stay alive and helping to create distance from them, from the part that wants to die. One way we do that is to help the person connect with reasons for living, while at the same time decreasing the visibility and presence of things around them that may facilitate their desire to die. We've learned that the perspective of a suicidal person, that a crisis point has been reached, that the pain seems unbearable, whether it's emotional pain, physical pain, or sometimes both. For a moment, I'd like you to think back to the most painful thing you've experienced. Maybe it was childbirth, or a broken bone, or passing a kidney stone, or something else. But at that moment, would you have been able to give someone clear and accurate directions to your house? Probably not. The unbearable pain makes ordinary thinking impossible. And so for a suicidal person, thinking becomes limited at that moment of crisis, a state of intense tunnel vision, where the other options just seem unavailable. It's important to remember that suicidal feelings are often temporary. They come on intensely and sometimes can pass in a matter of minutes or hours. So keeping people safe and making them feel supported can get them through those critical moments and save a life. There's evidence that putting time and distance between an individual who is suicidal and the means to take their life can be life-saving. That's why it's so important that we take steps and we know who is struggling and how to keep them safe. So who is at risk? Research has helped us determine the factors that increase the risk for suicide. Risk factors are characteristics of conditions that increase the chance a person might take their life, just like someone who's at risk for heart disease because of high blood pressure or a history of heart disease in the family. Some people are at higher risk for suicide than others. The main risk factors can be grouped into these three categories. Health factors that include biological and psychological aspects of their health. Historical factors are things that happen in a person's family history or past. And environmental factors, including societal and cultural factors, access to lethal means, as well as a life event. These risk factors can collide at different times in life and increase a person's risk for suicidal behavior at particular points in time. So let's look a little closer. Health factors include mental health conditions that we've said before, most people who die by suicide have an active mental health problem at the time of their death, sometimes multiple risk factors. Depression is the most common mental health condition and one that's most commonly found as a risk factor for suicide. Bipolar is also a high risk, but the disorder is less common than depression. But all these conditions put a person at greater risk for suicide. So detecting the presence of mental health conditions, it is critically important. The best way to be sure is to seek professional evaluation and effective treatment when you feel concerned or detect a change in your loved one's mental health. Not only can you reduce the risk of suicide, but your overall health, well-being, and life functioning can be improved. Many people don't realize their distress has become a health factor. Providing information such as a crisis number or mental health resources to someone who's struggling can be a solid step in helping them to connect to the help they need. So those aren't the only health factors that are associated with suicide risk. Chronic health conditions like diabetes can increase suicide risk, especially when the person has a mental health problem. Serious chronic pain, serious head injuries can also cause suicide risk. But there's historical factors, including past events, like a family history of suicide, a family history of mental health conditions, or past trauma, such as sexual abuse or combat stress. While most people who attempt suicide do not go on to die by suicide, previous suicide attempts also put a person at increased risk. Being abused as a child can also contribute to suicide risk. Environmental factors involve the circumstances of a person's life. There are layers of a person's environment that contribute to their overall level of risk. Let's look at a few of the most common. Contagion can include exposure to another person's suicide or graphic sensationalized accounts of suicide. Prolonged stress can include enhanced harassment, bullying, relationship problems, legal problems, unemployment. Stressful life events include experience like divorce, legal problems. Having access to a way of killing oneself is referred to as access to lethal means. This includes having access to a variety of things such as firearms, drugs, a bridge, or a car. And what others see is, here's an example of set risk factors that can converge in a person who's suicidal. The problem with public perception of suicide is that when someone dies by suicide, often the story only talks about the environmental factors. People see a life event like a breakup or bullying or job loss, and then they see the person die by suicide. So they might assume the person killed themselves because of that stressful event. But that's never the full story. What others don't know is the person who died might have had genetic risk for suicide. Maybe they were suffering from depression and anxiety, and their work life had become increasingly stressful. The underlying depression and anxiety might have caused the situation at work even worse, or the work stress could have made their depression worse. Perhaps they've been drinking more than normal. The key is that all these factors in combination could have contributed to the suicide. A life event can play a precipitating role for suicidal behavior, but without these underlying risk factors, life events aren't thought to cause suicide on their own. Now, during times of higher suicide risk, it's important to put time and distance between a person and the way of their ending their life. For the majority of people who experience a suicidal crisis, if they are unable to access lethal means, even temporarily, they're not likely to engage other behavior to end their life. That's where the importance of research comes in. Looking to the future, research is going to help us find the best ways to fight suicide. It's looking for biomarkers. For example, something testable in a blood sample that would show us people and identify those at risk. There's a number of clinical treatments, like particular types of therapies that are effective for suicidal people, and more need to be developed and studied. The good news is that through research, we're learning more and more about what helps those in suicidal crisis. And it can also help us identify the most effective interventions to reduce suicide rates and reduce risk in those suffering from mental health conditions, which leads us to prevention. There are protective factors that lower a person's suicide risk. So if you're proactive about mental health and make an effort to get healthier, you protect yourself. Feeling connected to family and community support can protect against suicide. When someone's struggling with depression, anxiety, psychosis, or substance abuse, these protective factors that can normally be strong can erode and weaken. And when that happens, having friends and family to remind us of our strength can be a tremendous protective factor. Problem-solving skills can also help. Life can really get tough, but being able to see a way through problems can be a protective factor. Cultural and religious beliefs that discourage suicidal behavior or create a strong sense of purpose can also be that protective factor. Mental health care is an important ingredient. Getting effective treatment for depression or anxiety can prevent suicide. Mental health should be treated like any other aspect of a person's health. There's times when you get sick, and it's critical to seek a trained professional. We need a culture where everyone knows it's smart to be about mental health. One of those biggest challenges in fighting suicide is getting people to treat their illness. Of those suffering from mental illness, less than half seek treatment. We need a culture where everyone knows it's smart to take care about mental health. So being proactive, how do we do that? Taking care of our mental health is just as important as taking care of our physical health. Seeing a mental health professional is a sign of strength, and many are taking that step. Request a thorough evaluation to find out if there's a mental health condition affecting your life. There are many types of treatments available, like various kinds of psychotherapy and medication. And research has shown that for many people, the combination of psychotherapy and medications tend to be the most helpful. But the most important thing is find the treatment that works best for you. The good news is that advocacy efforts are improving the access to mental health services so more people can get the treatment they need. The law now requires insurance plans to cover mental health services on par with physical health services. So we need mental health services, and 1 out of 4 of us will at some point, we should get treated and get our health back on track faster. Proactive self-care strategies like good sleep habits, exercise, nutrition, stress management can also play a critical role in protecting mental health and promoting resilience. We also have a need to provide support for those touched by suicide. The loss of one person to suicide profoundly impacts many. It's important that survivors have the support they need, both to heal and to reduce their own suicide risk. And since those with lived experience, those who've attempted suicide or experienced suicidal thinking, are at an increased risk, we need to make sure they have the support they need as well. The most important thing you can do is to put time between a suicidal person and their way of ending their life. Research shows that by temporarily reducing a suicidal person's access to lethal means, we give suicidal individuals time for that intense suicidal risk to diminish, and time for someone to intervene with mental health resources and support. Additionally, in most cases, when a person that is suicidal doesn't have current access to the means that's been on their mind, they don't substitute with another method. Temporarily reducing access to means equals lives saved. As already mentioned, it's a clear way to prevent suicide is to limit access to lethal means. During a period of high risk, the safer their environment is, the better the chance they have of living through that crisis period. So installing an inexpensive carbon monoxide sensor that automatically shuts off cars if carbon monoxide levels reach unsafe levels, that would save lives. We've learned through research that installing barriers on bridges deters suicide. And in many cases, bridge barriers actually lowered the suicide rate for the entire region. Restricting access to potentially lethal medications reduces suicide. It can be as simple as requiring lethal drugs to be sold in blister packaging. Firearm safety is important. In the United States, firearms are used in over half of all suicides. Making suicide prevention a part of gun safety education can reduce suicide rates. And contrary to what you might think, most people who are suicidal do not find other means, and the suicides just never occur in that moment, allowing more time for them to get help. So what can you do? First up, it's important to have a conversation with the person to allow them to share what they're experiencing. This not only shows that you care, but it allows you to gain more information about the level of distress. So watch for warning signs in yourself and others. Reach out to individuals in your life you're concerned about, and reach out to others if you're struggling. Seek mental health services if you're depressed or if your anxiety regularly interferes with your daily life, and encourage others to do the same. So let's look at the suicide warning signs that are typically displayed in 3 main ways that we can definitely detect: talk, behavior, and mood. Talk. Many people who are suicidal talk about ending their life, either directly or indirectly. They might say it outright or they might joke about it, but take it seriously. They may say they have no reason to live, or they're a burden, or they feel trapped. They might talk about feeling overwhelmed or being in unbearable pain. People thinking about suicide can display certain behaviors: increased use of drug or alcohol. They might have trouble sleeping. They might start acting reckless. They might withdraw from activities, especially things that they normally enjoy. They can give away their possessions. They might isolate from family and friends. And they also might start looking for a way to kill themselves, searching online for methods or shopping for a client. There's a lot of things to look for, so look for changes in behavior and trust your instinct. Assume that you're the only one who's going to reach out. In too many instances, people talked about their concern for someone amongst themselves, but hesitate to reach out for that person. So here's a rule of thumb. If you're wondering if someone is depressed or overly anxious, it's a sure sign you should reach out. And the same goes for you. If you're having suicidal thoughts, it's a sure sign you need to seek help. If you've reached out before, reach out again. The first time the person might not be receptive, but keep trying. Try talking to someone or another professional. Trust your gut. You might be the only person that's going to reach out. So how do you reach out? Talk to them in private. Listen to their story. Express concern and caring. But most importantly, ask them directly about suicide. There are some less helpful things that you want to definitely avoid when talking to someone who might be suffering from anxiety or depression. Avoid minimizing their feelings. Those of us who haven't experienced major depression literally can't imagine what it feels like. So avoid trying to convince them that life's worth living. If a person is nearing a crisis point, they're not thinking clearly. Philosophical debates about life being worth living tend not to be helpful. Avoid advice to fix it. If the person's having a heart attack, you wouldn't tell them to start exercising and eat a healthier diet. If they're in a crisis, what they need is to be heard and then led to help. Listen to their story. Offer to help them find a health professional and take active steps towards keeping their environment safe. If you think they might make an attempt on their life soon, stay with them. Do not leave them alone. Help them remove lethal means or remove themselves from the potentially dangerous area. Escort them to a mental health services or an emergency room. Help them to call the lifeline or call the lifeline yourself, and a trained counselor will tell you what you should do to help the person in distress. If they don't feel comfortable speaking to a counselor on the phone, they can also talk to the crisis line at 741-741. Now would be a great time to take out your phones and add both the lifeline and the crisis text line as contacts. Even if you never use either one, you may need them to help a friend. They're both open 24/7, 365 days. That lifeline is 1-800-273-TALK, which is 8255. And the crisis text line is 741-741. If it's an emergency, such as a suicide attempt in progress, call 911. Together, we can create a culture that's smart about mental health, will save lives, and vastly improve the lives of many more, because talk saves lives. It's a simple idea, but it works. And even if you're wrong about the suicide risk, they might still be in distress, and they may feel comforted and supported just by knowing you care and are taking the time to listen. Or they may need permission from someone to give them help for their depression. Talk does save lives. Thanks for being with us on this America Foundation for Suicide Prevention. You can learn more at AFSP or by following them on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for listening again, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
All right. So I hope everybody heard that. Still trying to figure everything out.
Yeah, can you start my video?
Say that again?
It says I can't start the video because you have turned me off.
Oh.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, no, it's okay. You could see me before. Okay, start my video. All
There
right.
we go. Hey.
Yay! So if you'll notice at the bottom of your screen, there's a little question and answer, a little Q&A box. So if you have any questions, or you can unmute yourself. Some other Zooms that I've been on, people had a little bit of conflict on trying to figure out that they also had to unmute their participation. So we've got quite a few people online, and we're happy to answer any questions or to give you any additional information. Again, for some of you that might have hopped on a little after the introduction started, I'm Charlynn Johns, the Program Director for Stop One Suicide at the Dallas Veteran Resource Center. While our platform is veteran suicide, because veterans do make up 20% of all suicides in the United States, suicide education and information, just as we've seen on this Talk Saves Lives presentation, is universal. People can enter into a mental health crisis at any point at any time. And by you being able to recognize and having the empowerment that you've participated in this training today, by you being able to recognize those signs, that you might be able to stop that person from making that permanent decision for a temporary problem, even though that seems like just something that you're never going to get over. On our website, we have videos that a variety of links, and one of the videos is about Kevin Hines, and there's two separate videos. There's a short one and a long one, but he is one of the very few people that survived a Golden Gate Bridge suicide attempt, and his message now to the community that struggles with mental health issues is that day that he made that decision to jump from the bridge wasn't the first day that he had showed up on the Golden Gate Bridge. But every time he went, he had decided, if one person asks me how I'm doing, I'm not going to jump. He was in distress. He was crying. He was, visibly shaken. And someone approached him, and in his mind, he's a 19-year-old kid. In his mind, he's thinking, okay, somebody's going to ask me how I'm doing. And the woman said, would you take my picture? So he wound up jumping that day. He did survive. Less than 1% of the people have ever survived that fall. But you do have the power to just intervene. And it's, again, we talked about lethal means and access to lethal means. The statistics and research has shown that if just 10 minutes is put between suicide ideation and access to lethal means, you can stop that suicide. So that access to lethal means, when we talk about Texas in particular, and certainly the veteran community, most veterans and most people in Texas do own firearms. The veterans statistic is quite high because that's the method that they're choosing most of the time. But when you can say, look, lock your firearm and put the key in a mayonnaise jar, even the interruption of having to go and dig the key for the gun lock out of a mayonnaise jar, that puts a break in that suicidal ideation and that access to pulling the trigger. That can save lives. It's a statistical fact. So again, you can do that for yourself. You can tell your friends, you can tell, and again, if you have a firearm, you can put the key in an ice cube and freeze it, and then it has to defrost. And having that interruption and that synapses in your brain can stop that suicide attempt and save your life. So the website for Stop One is stop1.info. Please make a note of the disaster distress line. If you're unfamiliar and uncomfortable in accessing the crisis line, because you think, oh, they're going to send the police or something. The disaster distress line is implemented when in natural disasters. The pandemic has caused a natural disaster to be implemented across the United States for every county and every state. That telephone number is 800-985-5990. They have licensed professionals taking calls, and if they determine that it needs to be elevated, they will elevate the call. You do not have to be the person that's in distress. You can call on behalf of a friend, a neighbor, someone you saw, and they can, walk you through, hey, here's what you say the next time you see them, or call them right now and reach out and find out if they're doing okay. On the Stop One website, when you first pull it up, stop1.info, it'll ask you, a pop-up comes up and it says you can know the signs of suicide, and you can download the PDF, you can print it out to where you can keep it handy. There's lots of information on there. There's information about the pandemic, as well as all kinds of suicide crisis health information. Thanks again, Jimmy and Overwatch, for allowing us to impact your community, and certainly we are here and available to help anybody stop one.
Hey, Charlynn, thank you so much. We do have a couple questions. One from Colorado. Can I get a copy of your presentation? Is it already available online?
The Talk Saves Lives, you mean the slides? The slides are available through the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So if you, especially in Colorado, if you want to connect with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention in your area, they can connect you, and they give you training, and let you go through it, and you can present it to anybody in your community. Now the next one, to raise it, is there a PSA, public service announcement, that we can share? Yes, I'm not sure what that would look like. We do have videos. There's a training video on our, like a short 30-second public service announcement regarding the training that's available through Stop Saves Lives. Through Stop One. And my email is Charlynn Johns, CHA. I'll type the answer down here. RLYNN Johns @sbcglobal.net. And you can also connect with us through the stop1.info website. And we will get you any information, whatever you need. We're here to try to assist you with that information. There's lots of downloadable resources on the Stop One website, and the information is out there. Unfortunately, people aren't accessing that information until there's a 911 crisis, and then they kind of get a little panicked about what to do. So we've got another question. What if they're not showing any signs whatsoever? In my experience in the suicide prevention community, and certainly having known people that are have died by suicide or have made suicide attempts, I am a suicide survivor, so there are signs, and that's why it's important for you to know what to look for, and to know how that manifests itself, whether it's isolation, or whether sometimes it can even present like like really happy. They can go from depressed and isolated to where they can go to excessively happy, like, yeah, man, everything's great, no, I'm fine. And that is a very serious indicator, because it can be an indicator that they have a plan and they've worked it out. So again, knowing those different kinds of things that start to present themselves in suicidal ideation environments can make sure that you step in and have that intervention. Time between suicidal ideation and access to lethal means is critical. Time and just being able to put that distance up. Now, we can't save everybody. There are certainly people do get a level of determination based on all the multiple complicated factors that there are. However, you want to be the person that doesn't have, wow, I thought that there's something wasn't right. I knew that something was going on, and I just wasn't comfortable in saying something. Always trust your gut. Don't worry, so what if they get mad at you? If you feel like they're in danger of harming themselves or someone else, call the police. And you can say, wow, no, my friend would never talk to me again if the police showed up at their house. Well, they're going to be alive to get over it. So that is something else that you want to be aware of. Don't ever be afraid to call the crisis line. Again, if you're thinking, wow, something just really isn't right, I just don't feel right about it, just call them up and let them know. Be direct. Say, are you thinking about suicide? Don't, dance around it. Because by you saying, are you thinking about suicide, you've let that person know that you're not going to back away, that you're not going to be afraid of it, that you're not going to go like, oh man, come on, that don't be ridiculous. You've got so much to live for. Again, what that presentation showed is when you're talking with someone about a life and death situation, take it seriously and don't minimize it. I know that can be a hard road to try to navigate in the veteran community, with veterans, among veterans, but you don't want to have regrets. And I've been to too many funerals where there was a lot of people with a lot of regrets, and that is crushing. One of the quick, brief things that they discuss in the presentation is the contagion effect. People that know someone that has died by suicide are 40% more likely to see that as an option. And that does include the children of people that have died by suicide. That does include the friends of people that have died by suicide, because it then becomes an option that appears to be acceptable. So if you know people that, and probably most everyone in this webinar do know someone who has died by suicide, take care for yourself and know this is not something to be taken lightly. This is life and death, and your life matters. Your life means something. The world needs you. It needs the love and the gifts that you have to give, and the love and the gifts that you have to receive from your friends and neighbors and the community around you. So please, again, whatever we can do, we will respond. I'm kind of long-winded and passionate about this situation. So
we got one more at the bottom. We had a caregiver in our epilepsy community that we mentioned earlier that recently committed suicide. It's very hard to have a child with a disability and figure out life day to day. Any thoughts?
Figuring out life day to day. I've been involved with the disability community for 23 years. I worked with an organization called Johnny and Friends. If you're it's an international organization. I would, it's for people that have been impacted by disability and for not just disabled people, but also for caregivers. It gives you a community of support. It's for any type of disability. They have family retreats. There are, I know that just from my experience in working with the community, that I can't even imagine the consistent 24 hours a day, 7 days a week responsibility that is placed on those parents. I mean, it's unfathomable to me. And then to add the current situation that's going on in the world, again, I can't imagine what that is like. I do know that there is help out there. I do know that there are communities of people with like experiences that are navigating, and sometimes you don't need to have somebody know what exactly you're going through. You just need to know you're not alone. And in times like these, it's critical not to isolate and to search out those groups, those organizations that can come alongside you, that can offer assistance, practical assistance by people that are going through similar situations, as well as just being in that community. So again, the name of the organization is Johnny and Friends, and that's JONI and friends.org. And I've been involved with them for 23 years, and I have a big heart for the community, and I was especially honored to be asked to speak to the group tonight, the Overwatch folks tonight. So it is a horrific tragedy and loss that someone in the community, it just reached that point. I mean, it's devastating. It's devastating. So, I gave my email. You can reach out to me offline, and I'm happy to, give you any resources that I know and connect you with other people in that community that I've known for many, many, many years.
I think that's it for tonight. Again, I can't thank you enough for being here. It means a lot to us. It means a lot to me personally. You know my background and where I came from and everything. So this was great. It was a great way to close out Mental Health Awareness Month. So
thank you.
Again, I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, and please, reach out to Jimmy if you don't get a chance to write my email down. You can always connect through our website, stop1.info, Charlynn Johns at sbcglobal.net, and I'm very accessible. I'm on all forms of social media. I'm all out there. Everybody can look and see who I am and what I'm about quite readily. You can Google me and find all kinds of interesting things. So again, it's a great honor. I'm so sorry for the loss to your community, and we're here for you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.